Hello, and welcome back. It is time for the Go Narrative Friday show, and I couldn't be more excited to be back today. It is August the 22nd, and what a summer it's been so far. I hope that you've been having a great summer and that you've been perhaps putting some new stories down in your life, experiencing some stuff that you're going to be able to tap into as a part of your overall story capability. And whilst I think that every time something crazy is going on, last summer it was the Athens hospital incident. This summer I've got something to share with you today. I'm super excited to share with you. It's not just about the story. And in fact, one of the things that I'm constantly doing is smacking myself on the wrist and saying, Matthew, remember the curse of knowledge. Chip and Dan Heath, Chip and Dan Heath, they coined this phrase in the fantastic book Made to Stick. And the curse of knowledge is something that naturally happens to us as we become an expert in anything. And in business, what that means is we get so deep into the thing that we have to know about that we end up starting too deep when we talk about it. For me, a very simple thing that I'm constantly reminding myself is, why do I end up speaking to somebody? They're often, the folks we chat to, they're often not looking for story help, for storytelling help, whatever flavor of story we're talking about to start off with. They've got a specific pain that they're trying to deal with. Like, it could be any number of specific things, right? But ultimately, it's peace, right? What do you mean, Matthew? What do you mean by peace? It's that peace that comes with confidence that you're doing the right thing. It's that peace that comes with knowing that not only have you done the right thing, but you've put all the right efforts in. You've laid it on the line. Yes, you've worked hard. Yes, you may have burned the candle at both ends, but you did everything right. Now, everything and right, like, there's a million ways to do things, and we're never going to be able to do everything, but you've done the needful. You've showed up. You've learned what you need to learn. You've pushed yourself every single day. You've set hard targets. You've met those targets, and there's a peace of mind that comes with that. And anything that stands in the way of peace is the opposite of peace, right? It's the anxiety, it's the stress, it's the worry. Am I doing the right things? Have I done enough? All of those kind of pains that we all probably resonates with all of us, right? Probably you're thinking, yes, Matthew, I've felt those experiences myself. And it's that which I seek to anchor on. And of course, there are some specific things that I'm looking for in terms of what kind of pain are you experiencing? Where do you feel like, despite all of the best efforts you put in, you still aren't finding that peace? And if you're not getting clarity through all the chaos, you're never getting to that peace. And that clarity element is so important because it's about seeing the way, right? And that's so closely related to that idea of peace, that internal sensation that we've done the right things, right? We've done everything the right way, right? We've done what we could in the best possible way possible. Now, how does stuff kind of fall apart when you're running a startup, or if you're any kind of innovator, but in particular if you're a founder, right? It's our pitches to investors, are they landing, right? Are we getting the investment? If not, there's not going to be any peace. And even if you come out of the investor meeting and you think maybe it went okay, and even if it ends up having gone okay, if you're not confident, you're not getting that clarity, and you're not getting that peace, it means you're still rolling the dice. You're still taking too much risk in what you're going into. And unfortunately, you have your own curse of knowledge, just like I do, right? We all have that. And I guarantee you, and I see this all the time, the time you spend perfecting what you're doing, building what you're doing, figuring out who to sell it to, selling it, all of that, when you sit down to figure out what that investor pitch is going to be, or further down the line when you're building out sales decks, that you're so wrapped up in the thing, in the what that you do, that you lose touch with the how and the why. And when you get disconnected from that wow and that why and that how, which I guess becomes wow, when you get disconnected from the wow, it's not clear and there's no peace. Got to pursue the wow. There we go. We've got something new. I love it. Love it. Creativity, human creativity. A mistake breeds something new and something fantastic, right? So I see this sensation that people have of stuff slipping through their fingers, right? And another one that people always, but this shoulder and this shoulder have been cried on so many times from founders, and the pain of the team challenges, right? Whether it's hiring the right people, whether it's dealing with a hire that didn't go well, whether it's figuring out, am I outsourcing? If so, what am I outsourcing? What am I bringing in-house? Like, the number of times I've heard pain expressed there is more than I could count. And one thing that comes back time and time again is that not being on the same page, right? What's that sound like? Sounds like not being clear, not having that clear line. And when we're not on the same page, we don't feel at peace. If you're battling to try and get the people around you to understand what it is that you're trying to communicate, you're not going to find peace. When the investor is asking tough questions and you're on the back foot and you feel like you're getting everything wrong, every question, even though you could have sworn that you shared the numbers and you could have sworn that you did everything right, that's not going to leave you with a sense of peace. And this experience, the opposite of peace experience, can really feel like you're holding your breath. And it sometimes is literal. You finish saying something in the pitch meeting and what's next? What are they going to say? Or you get asked a tough question and what am I going to say? Wow. Wow. Don't forget the wow. The wow is how and why together. And this summer, I experienced something which beautifully articulates this. And at its core as well is this idea of what I'll sometimes call a golden thread, or the red thread that weaves through everything. I'll often use it in terms of when I'm talking about a narrative, that red thread that ties everything together, right? Golden thread is another one that's kind of fun to use. But today, I'm going to refer to it as a chain. And the reason why I'm going to refer to it as a chain is twofold. One, my story involves a real chain, and so I need to use it for the story to make the story and the point that I'm making work, right? Because the point I'm making here is, if you bring the wow, you see clearly, you feel at peace, you find success, right? And that is ultimately what storytelling helps you do. And by the way, not just storytelling, but story. The storytelling is just the expression. If you don't have the story dialed in, you're just guessing the story, and then your expression is on a guess. So you're like rolling the dice twice. Don't roll the dice, don't roll it twice. So the chain is a big part of the story, and it's kind of like a framework. I'm thinking about frameworks all the time because I need frameworks personally for my ADHD and dyslexic brain to get stuff done. And that's resulted in story frameworks, right? To help you and to help folks in all forms of business. But right now, this ability for founders to get to this sense of peace. So chain, links in a chain. Picture that. Picture a nice, hefty, strong chain. I wish I knew some chain gauge terminology that I could slip in there, like a 6 gauge or a 15 gauge or a 3 centimeter or something like that. So this chain is a beautiful chain that is links, and maybe kind of like that kind of size. It's the links are small enough to be flexible, but it's big enough to be strong because it is holding an anchor for a boat. Okay. So bear that in mind as we go through this. So here's what happened. On the anniversary of my parents' untimely deaths in 2015, they were killed in a car crash, and it was the 10th anniversary this summer. So as you can imagine, it's probably going to be quite a day, right? So we were in Turkey, and we decided that we would charter a boat and go enjoy the water. My father was a sailor. My parents loved doing things on the water. When my mother finally went into labor with me, my father was out sailing. He had put it off, obviously, and I was 2 weeks late, and he was like, I'll go sail. I'll take a risk. I'll go sailing now. Well, of course, that's when Matthew showed up, and it was before cell phones. Somebody running down the pier trying to get his attention on the lake. And the water and sailing has been in our life for a long time. So it was a really appropriate thing for us to do. A beautiful, lovely thing for our family to do. For me, my wife, and our 2 boys. And I love the water. We all love the water. And I love trying to free dive, just kind of diving down and seeing how far I can go. I remember a couple of years ago when we were in Hawaii and having some problems with my inner ear and the pressure, and it was horrible. I was like, did I have a cold? Was it because we were closer to the equator or something? I was trying to figure out why, right? But I spent a lot of my time in the water, in the ocean, diving down. It's I enjoy it, right? There's a movie I saw recently called The Deepest Breath, which is beautiful and tragic, but lovely. And that's on Netflix. And it's about freedivers. And there's a bunch of YouTube videos you can watch about freediving. And I've always really had this interest in freediving. And I remember when I was little, I remember sitting around the kitchen table and having hold your breath competitions, right? So this is something that's been casually in my life as an amateur for a long time. And this day I was diving down. I was doing that. I was swimming down and seeing how long I could go. And I got an Apple Watch. And so I, would be able to see how long I was under the water for. And I was getting around a minute. I was pretty proud of how it was going. And we were at our third stop for the day. We're heading back, a lovely day, towards the end of the day, and it was our final stop. And when we stopped, my kids were straight off the boat and there was one other family on the boat and a couple, so very small charter sailing boat but under motor power. And so the kids all jumped in, and my eldest comes up from the water and loudly proclaims how deep it is, and if anybody can touch the bottom, he'll pay them $100, right? So that's kind of giving you a context of how deep it was, right? And I was doing my thing, still kind of diving down, and the captain was in the water. Every stop, the crew would take a few minutes, get in the water, cool off. It was really hot. And the captain was in the water, and he was over near the bow of the boat. And he motions to me. And I hear him saying something, and he's saying something like, it's better over here. So I swim over to him. All I've got on is my goggles and my swim trunks. That's it. Didn't even have the GoPro at the time. It's back on the boat. And I get over to the bow of the boat, and he motions to the chain and under the water, and points under the water. I have a look under the water. You see the chain go down all the way to the bottom. And in broken English, he proceeds to tell me that it's better to use the chain. You can go deeper. I'm looking down. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty deep. It's like, he says 10 meters. If you're in the US, it'd be like, what's that? 36 feet or so. And at 33 feet, you're at 2 atmospheres. At 10 meters, 36 feet is about 3 stories. Like being on the top of a 3-story building. Okay. Imagine that kind of height and the water, right? So I'm looking down there, and you see the chain go down and kind of curves down a little bit towards the bottom. And he is kind of saying a few things about going under the water, and I'm making some motions like I'm going to do it. And he says, stop. I'll go first. And I'm like, totally cool. Do the demo, please. And all he's got on is his mask. He's got a snorkel, but it's just kind of dangling there, and his swim trunks. And he goes down, and he goes arm over arm over arm along the chain. And he's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and he gets to the bottom. And as I see him at the bottom, he turns around and he kind of goes like this, and I give him thumbs up. I saw him at the bottom, and the thought that went through my head was, that's really cool. I wish I could do that. It's not going to happen. And this whole time he's doing that, I'm slowing my breathing down, trying to slow my heart rate down. I'm big, deep breaths, oxygenating my blood, right? All these things I know about what you need to do when it comes to freediving. I even watched this video once. It showed that it might have actually been the Limitless, the movie, the first TV series, the Chris Hemsworth Limitless. And I think it was from that they were doing the freediving, and it was fascinating to watch how their chest would change. When she would breathe, or her stomach would breathe out. When she breathe in, she'd breathe in, big. Her belly would like expand, breathe out, and she would like this big concave in her chest, really showing this practice of getting as much oxygen in as possible, and also trying to get hold as much as possible as you can while you go down. So here I am looking down at him, and I'm calming myself down, and then he floats up just elegantly, just like comes up to the surface. Right? And there's a difference between the light and the dark, right? At this point. And I do it. I think I'm going to go. And so I copy him. I go hand over hand down the chain, right? And as I get to, must have been about 10 feet or so, 15 feet. It's probably, what I was probably doing on my own was probably somewhere in the sort of the 10-foot range, or under my own power. At that depth, I start to feel my goggles pressing into my eye sockets. And I just keep going, calmly going down, and I get to the bottom, and my son's words went through my head about touching the bottom. And I was like, ooh, if there was something here, like a stone or a shell I could grab, I could take it back up. It was very sandy, and there was nothing around. And I quickly moved on from that and just thought, I'm not going to think about that. And it was like this ability to just block it out. Like I was getting distracted. I had this clarity where I was going to get taken off course, but I went back on course, just like the chain, right? That framework, back on course. And I turned around, I could see the chain going up, and I could see this cathedral of blue all around me. And it's in a cylindrical, right? When you look at it like that, because in any direction you go, the water gets thicker and deeper. As further away from you, the thickness of that blue gets darker, but it's this effect of like being inside a cylinder, right? And at one point I thought to myself, at some point I'm going to have to go get a breath. Became acutely aware of the fact that the last breath I had was all I had keeping me alive. And in that moment, I felt that thinness of the membrane between life and death in this very controlled state. You know, I drive cars on a racetrack, right? I drive sports cars on a racetrack, and am I putting myself at risk when I do that? Yes. But there was something different about this. It was so calm, it was so intentional, it was so peaceful. And yet, it was so different. Like, I wasn't breathing. That's what we do every day. I was under this pressure. At this point, the pressure was holding me. I could feel it pressing me. I had this, what felt like a neutral buoyancy. I wasn't floating back up. I wasn't dropping down, but I wasn't floating back up. And despite having the breath in my chest, and I couldn't hear the same way. Everything, like all these little elements of humanity, be kind of like stripped away, and in their place, this being faced with this natural beauty. Like I said, this cathedral of blue under the water. And this experience of peace. When I later told my wife, who was horrified that I did this, for good reason, look, the captain knew I was there, it was okay. She proceeded to say, I couldn't do that, I'd panic. And I said, you'd be dead. If you panic, you die. If you panic at the bottom, you die. If you panic halfway up, you die. If you get lucky after panicking and drowning, you may get pulled out of the water, breath, CPR, all that, maybe you survive. But the probability of dying, especially 3 stories down, 2 atmospheres of pressure, if you panic and you swallow that water into your lungs, the captain's not going to be able to swim down and get me and pull me up at that point. So this awareness of this membrane, the thinness between life and death, yet maybe it was my meditation, maybe it was the rhythmic hand over hand with the chain, with that framework of watching the captain go down, I had this peace. I could see clearly going down, and I knew what I had to do to get up. So I kicked off the bottom, and I just kind of floated up. I remember I breathed out at this point, some of the air, sort of almost like a jellyfish, a bubble that kind of floated with me for a few seconds before it accelerating away. And I got within 5-10 feet of the surface, and at that point the light was back again, because when you're down that deep, it's actually, the light is quite diminished. It's a very surreal experience. I kicked and I burst up to the surface, took a deep breath of air, and out of absolute fascination, a few seconds later looked at my Apple Watch, and it told me that it had been 3 minutes and 18 seconds, I think it was, and 36 feet deep. So wow, what an amazing experience. That peace, that being able to channel through that whole experience, from the chain to being down there to coming back up. And it created this legacy moment for me, this connection to nature that I'd never experienced like that before. And it gave me more than just giving me a new story. It upgraded my operating system. And if you've spoken to me, you'll have heard me use the term operating system when it comes to storytelling, right? Something I'm really fond of. And it was this survival under pressure. I made it through despite the pressure, the physical pressure, the mental pressure, all of the things that could have not only killed me, but just destroyed that entire experience. But I was able to make it through. And I was thinking about it afterwards, like, it really, that chain, and freedivers as well will, you know, whether they're using the fins or they got the rope, there's often that part of the experience. And the chain changed everything for me. It really, for me, was this like analogy of structure with story as well. The links in the chain, they are, story isn't fluff, it's functional, right? And story structure, even the simplest of story structure, and there is a spectrum, even the simplest of story structure will help you stay calm under pressure, right? In the investor meeting, you've got the story. Not only do you have the story that you're then going to express, right, and live, but your partner, co-founder, technical director, engineer, head of engineering, whoever is with you, is in the same story, on that same page of the story, because of that agreed chain that you worked to build before. And it's, again, it's not just storytelling. And that's what a lot of people get wrong about trying to do better at storytelling, is they don't look at the story. They don't bring the structure into the story. They don't understand the story, right? It is a lived experience that you can also engineer. I had a lived experience with the deep. I'm also able to engineer elements of the connection of that story to what we're talking about today, right? That clarity, that peace. These are all things that came from my story, and I knew, because this is what I do, I had this amazing story that I would love to tell you today, but I wasn't just going to stand here today and tell you that story if it wasn't going to help you. This isn't the Matthew gets on a stream on Friday and just says whatever he wants. This is Matthew trying to help you find peace, find clarity, eliminate the pains of the pitch deck, the team leadership, the recruiting, the PR, the events, all the pains that you have that have story as an element. I want to help you with those, right? And I know that when you bring story in, it helps alleviate, because it brings clarity, it brings structure, and it brings peace. That's why I shared the story. Now, when you get up in front of that, especially Series A, going for Series B, you'll never hear me recommend that you should have the whole thing be a theatrical performance. Will story show up? Yes. How will it show up? Well, it's going to depend, right? But no matter how you approach any storytelling in an investor pitch, it's actually about understanding your pitch, your business, your market, your customers, prospects and customers, and all of those things are a lived experience, and a lot of those things are a lived experience that you can engineer. Okay? Take what you're doing and look at it. Ask what you're trying to help people do. What do people want? Right? With you, I know that you putting a pitch deck together for an investor is something that you want to do. Desire, right? I know that there's difficulty in doing so. What do we put in? Where do we put it? Like Series A to Series B, numbers are going to be a big part of that pitch. And then how do you untangle that knot? So that's difficulty. And then how do you untangle that knot? So desire, difficulty, untangling of the knot in French is denouement. And that's the power of 3D story right there. That, when you think about that with your customers, when you think about the power of 3D story with your customers, what do they want? What's standing in their way? How do you help them untangle the knot? Okay, story. The investor who's sitting the opposite side of the table of you, what do they want? They want to make money and to do that in a way that is interesting, that is in a certain space, for example, in high tech, where it can lead to more projects, investments, and more payouts, working with interesting people that they believe in. These are all things that the investor wants that's sitting across the desk from you or sitting in the audience. Have you thought about that? Because that's their story. And this is, again, proof of story being all around us. Spending even 5 minutes in your preparation for a pitch, thinking through that in addition to the customer one we talked about. What about your team? Why do people choose to work with you at your company? Do you have people that you could look at within your team and say, they want to work on innovation that changes the world, or they have a passion around solving this type of problem, and there was no products or services or companies that were doing it, and then we got connected. Ooh, look at what we just did. Desire, difficulty, denouement. We got connected, and now they are our VP of engineering, or they are our head of partnerships, and they are changing the way that this industry works. All of these stories have a use within the pitch. Even the customer one is kind of the obvious one. The investor one, you start to think, oh yeah, if I can think about them, I can tailor how I'm talking to them, and I can respect their story. Okay, and then what about your employees, right? Well, we're trying to show why our startup that has hit Series A is worthy of getting to Series B, worthy of getting your investment to Series B. And guess what? A part of that, how we do that, is our people. And I'm not going to stand here and just say we've got the best people like anybody can say. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to tell you the wow, the why and the how of some of the folks on our team and how they're solving this. Because you know what? The numbers are a proxy. Numbers are only ever a proxy. And if we're looking to get from $180,000 a month, monthly recurring revenue, to 250, we are going to need to solve X, Y, and Z. And the only way we're going to solve those is by doing this. And this is what this person on our team does. And within that, articulating what we touched on at the beginning, what they want, what stood in their way, and why they're now a part of the team. And so if you're sitting on the other side of the desk, right, as an investor, You're believing. And you're looking at the numbers, which for all you know could be made up. Anybody could put numbers on a slide. Anybody. You could go out right now and just make up numbers that claim to use AI and have it come up with a fake business plan, right? Anybody can do that. But you've got to prove you know what's behind those numbers, right? And sometimes that is articulating the what of the research or the capability that you have. But other times it is the wow, and it's the why, and it's the how. And all of those elements are story. And if you have a way to cut through the noise, to stop looking for stones and shells on the seabed and get back to what you're focused on and keep that focus, you'll find that peace, and you'll know that you've done everything possible to land the pitch that's going to get you to Series B. And that's why me sharing that story is relevant and okay and a good use of your time, because it all comes together to help get to that place of success, right? And every place of success needs some specifics, right? In this case, as a founder, it includes things like the pitch decks and the team and the investors, and we're connecting all of those things together, and you are doing a lot of work to bring all of those things together. And story frameworks are going to help relieve some of that pressure. They're going to help you stay focused. They're going to give you what you need. They'll be the chain you can hold on to get you to your destination safely and then back again, whether that's to an investor meeting and back home, or getting the Series B and taking your company to the next level. And that is the power of 3D story, and that is the power of story and frameworks. And I hope that that was an enjoyable summer injection for you. You can probably guess why I love hearing stories so much, because in this case, it was an experience that I had that I was able to share. But in other cases, it's a story somebody has told me, like yesterday, when I was having a conversation with Antonio from EM Wraps in Seattle about getting a PPF replacement for my car. And he told me about his business and how he grew his business, how he started his business, how he was doing commercial PPF wrap, and he wanted to do something more colorful, And that became a thread through his whole story that he told me yesterday. Started with doing color wraps and then finding that balance between PPF, see-through, and color, doing matte, for example, to bringing a little bit of creativity in, to doing anime art, to doing race cars, to doing the Ferrari Challenge series, and designing it all, and starting to move into upgrades on the outside of the vehicle to give it an extra little bit of visual 3D creativity in addition to the 2D creativity. You will pick up stories and you will encode them with that framework, right? You'll listen to the desire, you'll listen for the difficulty, you'll listen for the denouement, and you can do some of that yourself. But of course, I would love to be the person bobbing along in the water with you, who's helping you, talking you through how you need to do it, and being there for you to provide some safety and to help you do it again and do it again and do it again, stronger and better, more focused, more peace, more wow every single time. And that, my friends, is our welcome back from the summer little web stream. Today we are skipping the teardown, not going to muddy the waters with that, and I will leave you with a few little bits and pieces here. This feeling empowered, for me, it's a level of peace, right? I want you to feel this. I want you to feel this level of clarity, peace, and empowerment, right? And it's not just about feeling, which are great to have, but it's also about what happens because we've done the things that are giving us this feeling. We get results, right? So we get better page conversions, we get more engagement because it's more engaging. And most of the founders that I work with are not selling a commodity product. Commodity products, yeah, you might, I'm shopping for a generator right now to provide some survivability for our home office if there's a power outage. And I've lived the story, right? And I've got to the point where I'm comparing the bits and bytes, the speeds and feeds, the power, the ports, the plugs, right? And that's probably not what you're selling. The funny thing is, I went down the Westinghouse route and was comparing some of its competition and the details. And then a friend said, look at Honda. So when I went to look at Honda, I didn't immediately go look at the speeds and feeds because Hondas are a lot more expensive. So now I've kind of bumped back up on the customer journey, and the question becomes, why is it worthwhile spending the extra money? And in this case, it's that survivability for the business if there is a power cut and if I'm relying on being in the home office. And so that connected with me, right? This is the results of engagement. Having that focus, that clarity on story, and that piece that you're going to get is going to result in these. And there will always be a time and a place for you to put the speeds and feeds and the details of your products. It's the wonder of the web and HTML. There's always a place for us to have the white papers, the product guides, all of that good stuff. But if you don't turn the prospects into customers, none of that stuff's going to ever matter. And having that clear chain and way to get there is going to give you these types of results. And so I will leave you with that. And apart from that, I will say have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for stopping by. We'll be back again next week, most likely with a teardown. And then we've actually got something exciting coming up. Actually, it might be for next week. We have Jeff joining us, and we're going to be talking about some of the exciting stuff happening in the Seattle area and the power of story, engaging communities and driving business. Again, cutting through the noise, getting clear, find that sense of peace because you know you've done everything you need to do, and getting those types of impact and those types of results. So thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful weekend, and I can't wait to hear from you what your story is. So shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. I answer all of them. I want to hear your stories. I'm so excited for you to figure out how to get your story nice and clear, and reach out and we can point you to exactly the right resources to get that done and give you the help and the support you need, whether it's something you do yourself with some of our complimentary resources or if it's something that we help you with. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.